Well, howdy, friends, and welcome to episode 2 of the Roundup Podcast. I am your host, Mitch Tidwell. Hey, we shot these episodes, we recorded these episodes in London, believe it or not. Several months ago, I had International Mission Board shot me an email, and they said, hey, we got some cool stuff happening in London and all over the world. We want to bring you out so you can see it. Maybe we can mobilize some students for mission. So, of course, I said yes. I'm not going to pass that up. So I went to London, and man, I got to see all these cool things that God was doing. And a lot of this was associated with the new GO2 initiative of the Southern Baptist Convention. If you've familiar with J.D. Greear, our president of Southern Baptist Convention, he started this initiative called GO2, which is a challenge that we need to challenge college students to spend their post-college, so when they graduate, to spend their next 2 years in some place strategic for the kingdom of God. And that was really what this trip was about. And really on the International Mission Board side of things, thinking about it internationally. And so what I did is I interviewed Matt Mig, who is in Summit Church. He works directly for J.D. Greear. He oversees the GO2 initiative, and got to interview him and just talk to him about what is GO2, where did it come from, what's the reason, and really what's the vision of what we would love to see accomplished through this. It's a fantastic time getting to interview Matt, awesome dude who himself spent his post-college 2 years on the mission field, man, changed his life. And so, man, it's a great interview. And so I got kind of the macro vision from Matt, but then the micro vision from Chris Derry, who works for the International Mission Board in church partnerships, and he oversees the student mobilization team. And I interviewed him just to say, okay, so this is the vision that we want to send college students 2 years post-college. That's what we want to challenge them to. But what does that look like partnering with the International Mission Board? And so he kind of showed me some pathways, and we talked about some pathways to send students and some of the things that IMB has to offer. And really just a fascinating time getting to chat with him. Because this whole deal, well, step back and think about this for a second. So when we begin in college ministry, we always think, okay, we got to reach students, right? So we got to figure out ways to reach the campus. And then once we do that, man, we got to figure out how to develop leaders. We got to develop leaders to continue to reach the campus and to continue to perpetuate the ministry. But one of the things that we sometimes don't get to is actually sending. You know, when the college student graduates in after their senior year, sometimes we kind of send them along sometimes with just a, hey, thanks for being here, good luck, let me help you find a church or something like that. But what if, man, we sent students very strategically, as J.D. Greear says, that we challenge them to put their yes on the table and let God put it on the map. Man, what kind of future could we see? Because we know this, and if you've been around Roundup events, you've heard this a million times before, but students are malleable, they're moldable, they're sendable, they're all those things. They're literally still growing. Their brains are still growing. So how they're shaped and formed today affects the next 10, 20, 30 years, which obviously affects the church and thus affects the kingdom. So, man, what if we were strategic with that piece? So anyways, I'll quit rambling, but without further ado, this is the Roundup Podcast London edition, where we talk about the GO2 vision.
You're listening to the Roundup Podcast, a podcast on reaching the college campus, developing leaders, and sending out kingdom multipliers. This podcast is created by the Southern Baptists of Texas Convention and provided through cooperative program giving.
All right, well, welcome to the Roundup Podcast. My name is Mitch Tidwell, and today I have with me Matt Mig.
Yep.
Hey, Matt, how are you?
I'm good, man. How are you?
Man, doing really well. Hey, we're talking today about GO2, and before I get too into that, I just would love to know a little bit about you. So, man, tell me about yourself. Who are you? Where are you from? What do you do? All that.
Yeah, so I live in Raleigh, North Carolina. I work for the Summit Church, and I specifically work for our pastor, J.D. Greear, doing a bunch of different projects. And one of those projects I get to work on is the GO2 project. It's one of the most exciting ones I can do right now.
So you're just spinning all kinds of plates, trying to keep them going.
I get a little hand in a bunch of different things. Kind of keeps it fun, keep you on your toes, you know.
Awesome, man. Well, so we're right now we're in London. The IMB brought a bunch of national collegiate leaders over here to talk about GO2, kind of vision cash for London and kind of all over the world, how to mobilize college students. But why don't you dive into a little bit of like, what is GO2? Like, where did this start? What's the vision of it? What's the reason? Can you dive into that?
Yeah,
for a
sure.
second?
So GO2 at its core is a challenge for students to accept. It's a challenge specifically to give the first 2 years of their career to living and working as a part of a church planting team, whether that be in North America or someplace here, like in London, around the world.
Yeah.
Big picture, it's a challenge to put Jesus first in how they make decisions about their life, and to start that right away. So I kind of think of it like the idea of tithing your life. You give the first to God and say, God, I'm going to trust you with my career because I'm giving you these 2 years to do what you will with them. And that's a demonstration, a practical application of my trust, regardless of what you want to do. And after those 2 years, some may stay, some may not stay where they went for 2 years, but they're saying the first part of my career, that's yours, God. You use it for your kingdom and your kingdom advance.
Okay. So this is really an initiative for post-college students. So to give 2 years, just saying, hey, JD always, what's his thing? Put his yes on the table, let God put it on the map.
Yeah, put your yes on the table, let God put it somewhere on the map. That's right. Yeah.
I got it. So that's kind of the call, and it's focused on students, but why students? Like, why are we starting with that college 2-year period?
Well, there's a couple of reasons. One is that college students, the time you're in college, is a formative. It's one of the first times you're making a decision. Maybe you made the decision on your own a little bit as to where you go to college, but really you're making a decision about what your life is going to look like, and you're going through the process. Maybe it's sometimes for the first time of wrestling with how do I rank all these important, like they're all important, but they're all competing in some ways factors about what decision you're going to make. Doing that in a God-honoring way sets a trajectory for your life about the decision you're going to make 5 years from now, 10 years, from that point about what job you're going to take, where you're going to move your family, that kind of thing. It's a trajectory setting thing. I mean, there's other practical reasons too, like college students. Our college team at Summit, half jokingly, will say college students are some of the most sendable people on the planet. Because they're all leaving in 4 years. I mean, 4, 5, 6 years, I don't know, but they're all leaving at some point. They're not going to stay where they are, and they're going to have to get a job, and they're going to move, they're going to get a house, they're going to get a job. And so why not make that decision in light of how can I serve and play a role in the kingdom of God? So there's some practical reasons why college students specifically, from a perspective of the mobility, they're also college student comes out, they don't have a lot of the other things that they would have to untangle to be able to get somewhere, so it actually can be sent fairly quickly. Like you and I might have to sell a house or sell a car or figure out where we're going to put our kids in school, and typically a college student does not have that, and so it's a decision that can be made, and it's also an easier way to send them. Yeah,
it's in such a ripe age to be, I think Brian Fry says that they're moldable, they're malleable, they're sendable, it's just such a prime time to send, and so strategic, for the nations.
Absolutely.
How is that? So you guys, this is not something new for the Summit Church, and I know you're not specifically in the college area of the church.
Yeah, sure.
But can you speak a little bit to how that's played out in y'all's church? Because this has been something that you guys have been doing for a while, as far as among your students, right?
Yeah. No, we've been doing it. Well, so we've been involved in some version of this. I mean, I personally am somewhat of a product of GO2 before we had anything that we had a fancy name or any kind of program. JD was challenging students, why not go? And I was a college graduate, and we decided to go, and we wound up as a journeyman overseas with the IMB.
Really?
And we had no system or pipeline to send me. We just had a call and a challenge, and some people found their way to somewhere. Over the years, we've built a discipleship and mobilization pipeline. Our college ministry's done a fantastic job of building out a process by which they introduce students as freshmen to the mission of God and why every person, including college students, should devote their lives to that. And then they take them through a series of they'll put a sequence of challenges in front of them, starting with give a summer to living on mission and experiencing, just kind of going and seeing what God's doing in some of our North American church plants and some of our international church planting teams, and then they'll take them through all the way up to a conversation that they have with every single one of our college students in our graduating seniors during their fall of their senior year. Someone on our college staff will have a conversation one-on-one with them where they're asking them how they're making a decision about what they're going to do after they graduate. They'll affirm some things in their lives that they've seen God do, and they'll ask them to consider some specific things that they might do. Hey, we really think you're gifted in evangelism. We could see you on the London City team. Yeah. That might not be where God's calling you, but we could see you doing that. So they take them through that process and ask them to make a decision, yes, no, like call them to a decision point about would they commit these 2 years or would they not.
Yeah. So I feel like in a lot of churches, I'm not trying to beat up on anybody here, but you have just siloed ministries, you have your children's ministry, maybe a transition to youth, may not, and you have youth ministry, maybe a transition to college, most likely not, or even if you have, youth ministry, they move off to college, it's a different church. But thinking about that next piece with the college student, I call it the ministry cliff, that whether a student's graduate from being a senior in high school or a senior in college, it's like, hey, thanks for being here, we'll see you next time, or something like that. And so what a strategic step to say, hey, we want to be strategic, not only in the way we reach you, the way we develop you, but also the way that we send you. And you've been personally, why don't you share a little bit about how you've been personally impacted? Because obviously it seems like it's changed the trajectory of your life.
Yeah, I would say it has. I think it certainly has changed the trajectory of my career. I kind of came thinking I would go one direction, and certainly was not thinking about going overseas. And it was really, it was our pastor JD who was creating a vision, but it was one of the guys who was discipling me that said, I really think you should do this, and it's not going to sink your career. Yeah. It was that direct. It is not going to sink your career. Really? And he challenged me to do it and showed me how that role could still fit in what at the time I thought God was calling me to do. Now, of course, it didn't turn out to be exactly that way. Yeah. But what that allowed me to do was to discover, Jesus says that the kingdom of God is like treasure buried in the field, and when someone finds it, they're going to sell everything to get it. Yeah. And that challenged me to essentially put my faith in that. Like, do I actually believe that or not? Yeah. And what that allowed me to do while I was overseas, I got to experience some things that I would never have otherwise experienced. Yeah. I learned some things. God grew me personally. Practical way. I'm not naturally a hospitable person. Yeah. I moved to a culture that is like the epitome of biblical hospitality, and I have grown in that, and then used it for the ministry I now have back in Raleigh, where we even this past year we had somebody I met overseas as a journeyman. Who got a refugee visa and got placed in our town, and they wound up not without a place to live, and they lived in our house for a month and a half. Oh, wow. And it was a friend I made while I was a journeyman in an unreached, unengaged part of the world. And so it's been a cool, there's the things that have happened as a result of saying yes. God, I believe that if I give this to you, I can trust you with it, and that you'll do through me more than I would otherwise, that I could dream. Yeah. It's given me a bunch of opportunities to see him at work in my life that it wouldn't otherwise happening.
Man, I think one of the questions I know as a college leader, and you have students that they're thinking senior year, okay, I've got to get a job, I got to get prepared this year, I got to move on, and it's kind of moving on to that next phase of life. And I know that can be kind of a maybe even intimidating thing to challenge students, because I'm thinking in the context I'm in, ministering, I'm doing an interim right now at a church that ministers to a wealthy school and with mostly affluent parents, and for a child to go off and spend 2 years on mission is not exactly plan A for a lot of parents. So there's a lot of things there. So very encouraging to hear you say that as far as the guy that discipled you is like, hey, this is not going to ruin your career. Mom may be mad at you for a month or two, right?
I had to be he was up front for that. He's like, you got to be willing. You got to lay it down. Right? Yeah. You got to be willing for that to happen. Yeah. But the reality is, 2 years is pretty God can do a lot in 2 years, but 2 years in the course of your life and your career is pretty short.
Yeah, it is. It is.
It's a transformative time, and it's a training time. I mean, that's one of the things we tell our students is, regardless of whether that's where you're going to stay, like God may legitimately be calling you into finance or or healthcare or whatever it is, and that may not be where you might not be doing that for 2 years, but you're going to get training in how to make disciples, how to share the gospel, how to cross cultures, how to give up your own personal preferences, lay them down for the sake of the gospel. And what our churches need, no matter whether you wind up in Raleigh or London or Austin, Texas, or wherever, our churches need investment bankers, they need doctors, they need professionals who understand what that looks like to make disciples in their workplace, to lay down their preferences for the sake of the gospel. And that's what you're going to learn for 2 years, regardless of whether you stay there or not. I mean, I hope some people stay there, but regardless of what they do, they're going to learn that.
Because really, where else are you going to learn that? I mean, we can get that in our discipleship processes in the States, but obviously when you're in a new country, in a new setting, new context, you're naturally laying aside some of your comfort and preference. Just you're kind of forced to. Anyways, it's really good. So, kind of last question here is if I know that this was a big idea from JD and you guys. So, what if you guys could just kind of wave the magic wand and say, hey, this is what we would love to see happen through this. Ultimately, like what would that be? Like if you say if this happens, that's a win.
That's a good question. I want to start by saying I think one of the coolest things to me about this is that it didn't start with some, like we know of churches that were doing this before we were doing it. We learned it from them. And so I just think it's important to say that because we're trying to champion it and invite others to join us, but some of one of the best ways to tell when God is moving is when a bunch of different people have the same idea from God and they didn't get it from each other.
For sure.
And so it's been exciting to see that and learn from some others. I would say as we've all kind of come together to say, let's kind of champion this idea. Let's see if we can get this going. I would say ultimately the win would be that every college student goes through a biblical process of deciding what that sounds simple, but a biblical process of deciding what they're going to do with their lives. So they wrestle with stewarding the call that God's given them. Everyone is called. We say that all the time. Everyone is called. It's not a question of if, it's where and how. And so that they would wrestle with that question. And secondarily, I think that if they do that, what will happen is we'll flip the dynamic. There'll be double, triple the amount of workers going out into the harvest.
Oh man, absolutely.
That we won't have jobs that are requests from our field partners, from folks that are serving overseas, church plants in these key cities in the United States that are wanting people to come. The win would be that there's people knocking on their doors and saying, let me join you. I see God at work where you are. Let me join you where you are.
Man, that piece of wrestling, of just wrestling with God, hearing from God, and when students come and they want to, and then we all do this, but you want to get the answers right now, right away. But it's that process of wrestling God was where you really hear God, and that's really ultimately what you want from students. Is to hear the voice of God and obey it. Because we can talk about it, we can create great, marketing or whatever you want, but ultimately the voice of God is what's going to send them and sustain them, in the mission. So
that's right.
Man, it's such a key piece.
God doesn't need all of our college students to commit to 2 years to see his mission accomplished. He doesn't need that. But our students, they need to give their lives to God because of what he can do through that. And so the process of what they're doing, what the commitment, the sacrifice that they're going to make, that's the win out of this. And God's going to do amazing things through it.
Man, that's good stuff. Hey, tell us a little bit about, I know we got a simulcast coming up with JD and David Platt. Tell us a little bit about that and what people can do to kind of chime in on that.
So on November 14th at 7:30 Eastern Time, we're doing an event where JD and David Platt will be talking to college students. We do this regularly. JD does this for our college students as their pastor, where during the fall we'll bring them together and he'll talk to them about why the mission of God is so critical and why it's so strategic for college students to get involved, what that looks like, and he'll challenge them and say, as your pastor, I want you to consider this.
Yeah.
We just said, well, this fall, since GO2 is such a big thing, why don't we open that up and just make it, we've got the technology, why don't we just make that conversation available to anybody who wants to gather college students and kind of hear from these two guys talking through what that looks like. And our hope would be that ideally that college leaders would decide, hey, I want to gather, it doesn't matter if it's 5 or 50 students. I mean, it could be five students in a dorm room or at a dinner table, or it could be an event, a gathering of like 50 something where you get together and you would say, let's watch this, let's listen to this together, let's participate in this conversation together, and then coming out of that, they would say, I'm the discipler of these college students. It's important for me to say, and here's what I want to challenge you to do. JD will give a challenge, but there may be some specific opportunities that a college leader would have that they say, this is the summer project I want you to go on. Here's the partnership we have for journeyman with the IMB in this area. Okay. Here's where I want to challenge my students to. And so it becomes a resource that helps you mobilize if you don't have something already sort of planned this fall. Kind of just in recognition the fall is, particularly for seniors, but for any plans made over the summer, the fall is that critical time period for a student kind of deciding what they're going to do. Yeah. So we would love for you can join this the simulcast on the GO2 website, go2years.net. And we'd love for any college leader to join it. And even if they don't have students, join it, kind of listen to what's happening, figure out how they can do something like that fits in their ministry context. Okay.
So go2years.net, November 14th. 7:30.
Yep.
7:30 Eastern?
Yep.
Okay. And then that will, if they don't catch it then, possibly available afterwards?
Yep, we'll keep it up so that people can access it.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
The programming will feel like it's going to be a live conversation, but it'll be accessible and you can take whatever's helpful.
Cool. Awesome. Well, hey, Matt, thanks for your time, man. I appreciate you, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Well, I'm with my friend Chris Derry here today. We are in London at London, I guess you could say, kind of like Vision Lab.
That's exactly right.
That's exactly it. All right.
Vision Lab.
So Chris has been kind enough to invite me out and the IMB crew to come and take a look at London and see about looking at strategic places to send college students on mission, particularly with this GO2 initiative. So is that all? That's all correct, isn't it?
That's right, Mitch. Yeah, that's right.
All right. Well, Chris, tell us a little bit about yourself, man. Who you are, what you do with IMB, and then we'll dive into some more of this GO2 stuff.
Sounds good. Yeah, I lead the partner relations team for the IMB. It's a part of our mobilization group. Our primary focus is really the U.S. audience. So my team is responsible for coming alongside church leaders, whether missions pastors, senior pastors, and lay leaders that lead their churches out on mission. Also a number of student ministries all over the country. You think about every college and university or seminaries. Our team has a team responsible for coming alongside those leaders so that we can help to inform and equip students about pathways to be a part of the work in the nations. And then also the convention itself. You think of all of our 41 state convention offices, their missions leaders, our 1,200 associational offices all across the country. There's a number of leaders that can have a key influence in seeing Southern Baptists be a part of the work in their prayer, supporting financially, and then going themselves to be a part of it, or as God calls to send them to the nations and work with IMB teams.
Okay, that's awesome. Well, one of the things that we talked about with Matt Mig, was GO2 and this big vision to send students on mission, post-college, 2 years. So that's like the vision, that's like this macro. And IMB is entrusted with the micro of like, all right, we got to put feet on this thing.
Make it happen.
Let's make this thing happen. So I know NAM's doing partnering with this. You guys are partnering with this. And so what is that for GO2 lining up with IMB? What does that even look like?
Yeah, absolutely. The idea of GO2 is newer in the last few years. JD has been using his platform both from Summit Church, but then especially as SBC president with his messaging around gospel above all, our key focus as Southern Baptists, and putting first things first. And GO2 is an initiative that's underneath that umbrella, seeing college students give their first 2 years obediently to God as he calls would be something that we need to see all of us together to create a groundswell of change within the life of Southern Baptists, recognizing the opportunity that comes as first 2 years out of school. For the IMB, this is not a new thing for us. We've been sending journeymen overseas. Those those ages of 21 to roughly 30, 29, before they go to field personnel orientation. That's not new for us. For 54 years, we've been sending, I think, over 5,000 journeymen, seeing them to give those first 2 years fully funded because of the faithful giving through cooperative program and the Lottie Moon Christmas offering. They can go and work not just alongside our teams, but inside our team structure, being actively a part of the strategy to share the gospel, to help train and equip leaders, to disciple church plants that are happening here, and then also to faithfully exit areas as teams move from one place to another place in their work in the missionary task.
Okay, so this is, GO2 is a new thing. Journeyman is not a new thing.
Which is why this is so exciting, because this is really generating a lot of conversation about something that we, because of Southern Baptist Giving, they've entrusted us to already do well. We're just excited to see the stage be that much broader.
Yeah.
JD using his platform to really, and a megaphone to call Southern Baptist to go as the Lord calls.
Yeah.
And that a lot of that's domestically here too, working with NAM. That's where they're coming alongside to help see the next generation use those first 2 years with church planting. We just already have that defined pathway with journeymen. And as we see a lot of the time, those that go as journeymen then find either careers overseas where they can do that professionally full-time and work with our team still in a part-time capacity, or the traditional model in going as a fully funded missionary. Again, thankful to Southern Baptist to make that happen.
Yeah.
So the options are numerous for us. It's just exciting that there's a lot more conversation about it now.
Yeah. And it's been, being here in London, this has been really helpful for me because it's down on the ground. You're meeting IMB staff, you're meeting church planners, you're meeting people that are just kind of embedding themselves in this culture. And one of the things, and I know that we're primarily here to help mobilize college students and promote GO2 and journeymen, back home. Yeah. But what I've seen, especially, meeting with a lot of planners, is really the big need for journeymen to be here and on the field and what a help they are to the missionaries.
Yeah, when you think about global lostness is a big picture.
Yeah.
I mean, we call out numbers that 170,000 people die every day without Christ by our best estimates. And it's unbelievable, unbelievable amounts of lostness. When we get underneath those numbers, we look at world population, 52-ish%, roughly, of the world's population is under the age of 35.
That's crazy.
And so when you think about the places where the next generation in the nations, where they live, work, and play, our students have an opportunity to reach them in those areas because they're going to have the same look. In fact, we see, especially with a lot of our university ministries all over the world, it's our students who can make the most impressions and get in the door to places that our traditional, long-term, great standing missionaries just haven't been able to because of their age. So really using the lives of Southern Baptist journeymen to come with the IMB and go overseas allows us to enter into places to share the gospel, but we might not have that chance otherwise. But we see young adults, men and women, used in scriptures for God's purposes. This is not a new thing just for Southern Baptists either.
Yeah.
And the win there is that we're able to see open doors where the light of the gospel can press back against darkness.
Yeah. I've even being here, I think it's twofold. When we talk to Matt, you just see the enormous change that happens in the life trajectory change of a student when they give their 2 years, 2 years of mission of just getting out of their comfort zone, doing something they're not used to, and just really kind of putting their yes on the table and let God just put it anywhere. But also too, like thinking of, it's not just like this, it's not just like a mystery, like it's really a need. Even as yesterday, I walked from the hotel with John and Grace, the folks here doing university work, and we're literally walking down the street, and I didn't even realize at the time, I saw a bunch of students. We said we just passed 12 different colleges on the way and universities down on the way this path. And even me being 33 years old, I might as well be a grandfather to some of these young people, because like that's how much like you're instantly you're not relevant, and so it's like we have to have young people to reach young people.
It's going to take the next generation to reach the next generation, absolutely. Not that it requires them, but it certainly helps.
Yeah.
But it's not just young people reaching young people. Our journeymen are doing a number of jobs overseas that help our missionary teams in the actual work of the missionary task. Everything from entry to gospel sharing to discipleship, church planting, leadership development, and then exit to partnership with those national churches. They're helping us do research in the Americas, understanding where people groups are and studying or getting a better understanding of if there's a gospel presence in certain areas. They're helping us in a lot of places to do the training for jobs, helping indigenous peoples in sub-Saharan Africa, as an example, to be able to have a craft that allows them to create an income that then allows them to sustain their family. And then that's also an opportunity to share the gospel in the same. So, it's not even just university to university where you have young people reaching young people. There's a lot of things that journeymen are doing all over the world that really are just a part of the missionary task itself.
So if a church says, hey, I think I've got some seniors, it's fall, what do I, for me as a leader, what are the next steps I need to take in order to partner with IMB to figure out maybe this is a pathway for our students? Where does a college leader even begin with that?
Absolutely. Well, there's the first place you can always go to is our Journeyman website. The imb.org has a lot of great information about the multiple pathways to go to the field. And Journeyman has a page that's on there, imb.org/journeyman. From there, our teams can help to engage to answer those tough questions about what is it that journeymen are doing in different areas of the world? What can I help to inform my students of that will excite them about what God's doing in the nations and how they're a part of IMB team structures. So our teams can help to do that, and they can find resources like that online and connection points online. And then from there, it could be that it's a time for us to get together leader to leader to really talk through what vision casting could look like for their ministry. So whether that's a campus ministry or at a church. And that's what my team is positioned to do. And we're grateful for that opportunity. We recognize that every church is going to have specific nuances for how God is using their gifting, their resources to go and be a part of the work, whether in prayer, giving, going, sending out. And so we want to work together in that regard. Not every church is a summit church. Doesn't mean that every church has to be that in order to be a sending church. Mainly what we see is that those that are looking to send, it's about the DNA of that church. We want to see Southern Baptist churches not just have missions as an activity, but really as an identity of who they are. And that goes generation to generation throughout the church. And it's not just ingoing behavior, it's everything that they're doing as they consider the nations obediently for God. Again, and their prayer and their financial support, and then going to be a part of it if they're able to. So we want to help to come alongside leaders to help them to create that culture, and recognizing again that every church is different in how they do that. We have 174 years of experience in what God has been doing in the nations through the IMB. Right? We have 174 years of experience in sharing the gospel cross-culturally. We want to be available so that you can leverage us as a leader and leverage us to help your ministry to be a part of that work.
Real briefly, what are some of the places that students, because we mentioned as a journeyman you can work with university students, you can do some mapping, all kinds of stuff that's really a possibility that students can be a part of. But what are some of the areas that you guys are sending students to do mission work?
We send students everywhere. So we have 9 affinities all over the world, every major geographical area of the world plus the deaf affinity. And so students, journeymen, are a part of all of that. And even before journeymen, they're coming out for a summer or semester or a study abroad year opportunity. And then we see them come back as journeymen, where they're able to then really study language if that's necessary to do their job well, be a part of the team structure, and help to fulfill what that team strategy is. But they're working all over the world. In East Asia, we see them in numerous different countries working with our personnel. Same in Sub-Saharan Africa, the Americas, Europe, here in London especially. And there are lots of global cities where, especially at their age group, language is not always necessary for them to enter into certain areas to share the gospel. English is spoken in a lot of our major cities, and so they can easily plug and begin right in the work, plug and play with the missionary task and sharing the gospel.
Hey, something you said a minute ago, you talked about we've been talking about journeyman, but you also said study abroad, some mid-semester, semester things. Dive in a little bit more, because journeyman is definitely an option. We want to send students 2 years, but there's also maybe if you just need to butter them up. Maybe, I don't know what the right word is.
A toe in the water, a stepping stone.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, there's
like
some options that maybe that students can do even beforehand, before they do journeyman. Can you tell us a little bit about this?
Absolutely. The IMB offers numerous opportunities for students to go to the field. Short-term trips for a week or 2 weeks. A lot of those line up over a semester-long holiday or over the summertime. We do Christmas in East Asia as an opportunity for students to even devote that time of holiday to spend 2 to 3 weeks in East Asia working with our field teams. So we have numerous short-term trip opportunities, and again, those are all over the world, and those can be found on our site. And we can talk through what those opportunities look like and what the actual work is being done by students in conjunction with our teams. One of the two of the stronger pathways from there, if it's longer than a few weeks, is our summer opportunity.
Well, hey, Chris, you talked about the journeyman, so a 2-year program, post-college students can go, but there's also some other opportunities that are a little bit smaller, half semester, summers, things like that. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You think a lot of students are not exactly prepared to just go and give their first 2 years. Having never been overseas before, many of them, they're looking for smaller opportunities to get involved. And even now, before they graduate, just to get a taste of what God's doing in the nations through IMB teams and our partners. And so you'll find that through our 9 different affinities and the teams that are all over the world, they're submitting to us those small short-term trip opportunities. Some of those look like 1 or 2 weeks where they would go and travel overseas, spend a little bit of time, especially doing things like evangelistic work specifically. It could be on a university campus or something like that. But it's a direct opportunity to really meet field teams and learn the strategy and get right involved. One of the things we've seen that's really successful, if students can stay for a longer time, is to really dedicate time around their holiday. And so there's opportunities around Christmas time where they could go for up to 3 weeks, spend some time in East Asia. Or they could also dedicate many weeks during their summer. We have 6 and 8 week trip opportunities for students all over the world during the summertime. So they can use that time in between. We usually they grab a job. This can now give them the opportunity to go and work overseas and get a little bit more of a taste of the work that's being done by teams and stay there long enough to see some of the impact of what they're doing. The next real step after that is to dedicate a semester. For the IMB, we have our hands-on program. Hands-on is a great program where you'll see that because of the giving of Southern Baptists, we're able to partially subsidize the cost of that trip for students who are coming out of Southern Baptist churches. And a lot of times we can even extend them for an additional period of time, maybe an additional semester, to stay in the field. If their curriculum allows for them to do that, their family allows for them to do that, it's a great opportunity to really dig in, even learn a little bit of language while they're there, spend more time meeting different teams, learning an enhanced version of the strategy because they have more time around our field teams. And the great thing about that is they're able to really truly again see more of the impact of what work they're being done in the kingdom. There's a harvest out there for them to really be joyful in taking part of. So the semester opportunity hands-on is, and there's a lot of information that can be found about that on our website. So when we think about next step for a ministry leader to really start to educate themselves and their students on what those look like, we have lots of information that can be found if you call into the IMB, the Church Success Center number, or you can check out online and we'll have more information about that. But it's a great opportunity, and again, those are all over the earth, working with our teams.
So both the hands-on and journeyman, the IMB subsidizes some of that cost, is what you said for both of them?
That's right. For the hands-on program, we subsidize half of the cost to go.
Okay.
And sometimes it's around $4,000 in total cost.
Yeah.
And it could be almost $6,000 to go for more than 1 semester, 2 semesters, right?
Gotcha.
For the journeyman program for 2 years, we subsidize everything. Our journeymen go through our field personnel orientation alongside our fully funded career missionaries, so that's a great experience for them. We take care of their benefits, salary, housing, and everything else while they're there as well. So the journeyman program really is almost a full career track just for a 2-year term.
So how do people normally, so for the hands-on, journeyman, that's post-college, 2 years,
right.
So after you're 21. Hands-on can be done before you graduate. Have y'all seen churches use that? Is that basically, here's what I'm saying, is that seems to be like a great way to get students on the field, but also maybe prepare them for long-term service either through journeyman or maybe even a missionary, full-time.
Absolutely. I've been to appointment services for our career missionaries where it seemed 40 to 50% of those who were sharing their testimony at those services told us that they served as a semester or a summer missionary before going for journeyman or for long-term service. So that time is instrumental in preparing them because they're able to spend so much time with our teams and glean from them the things that they're doing both in their own spiritual development, but then also in carrying out the work that they then come back to their ministries after spending time for a semester, really able to make an impact in their local context again, whether it's on a campus or in a church. And that's for the betterment of the kingdom. That's even so. Yeah. Absolutely.
Man, that's good stuff. Well, man, if you're a college pastor out there, a leader, pastor, whatever, I think this is a great pathway to help students. Again, we always talk about the ministry cliff. Students just fall off, and what a great way to help your students live out the Great Commission, but also help them, beyond their college experience to continue in developing into who God wants them to be. So, hey, Chris, thanks for your time, man. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, Mitch. Thanks for having me.
Well, there you have it. I just want to thank Matt Mig for being on with us from Summit Church. Thanks for casting vision. And to Chris Derry, hey, man, thanks for being on and just helping us kind of get to know next steps. Y'all don't forget, if you need more information, it's imb.net, and then go to the number 2 years.net. So don't spell out 2, it's just the number, go2years.net, and you can find out some more information on GO2. And the simulcast will be November 14th at 7:30 Eastern, so don't miss that. If you do, no worries, they'll actually put it up again when it's done. So, check that out. Hey, thanks for listening. If you don't mind, leave us a review. Follow us on social media, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, SBTC Collegiate. Is our handle. Our website, sbtexas.com/collegiate. You can find us there as well. But appreciate you hanging on, and we will see you next time.